From VOA Learning English, this is the Economics Report. Ghana arrested more than 100 Chinese nationals in June. They were accused of illegally mining gold. In February, Zambia seized a Chinese-operated mine because of safety concerns. And Gabon has decided to seize property from 3 foreign oil companies, including one from China. Some observers say these and other incidents appear to be a reaction by African governments against Chinese investment on the continent. China became Africa's top trade partner in 2009, yet some Africans believe they are not getting enough for their exports. Bright Simons is with the Imani Group. He says China is no longer known only for giving loans and sending workers to build hospitals and roads. He says China is now a business partner. Ghana has taken steps against foreigners involved in shallow mining for gold. Only Ghanaians can get government approval for this kind of mining. Bright Simons says some Ghanaians rent the permits to foreigners who have the money and training to actually mine the gold. Observers say nations like Niger and Gabon want to get more for their natural resources. They want more money, more local jobs, and better living conditions. Worldwide demand for oil, coal, iron ore, and uranium has made their negotiating position stronger. Some nations are also concerned about abusive or illegal operations. In Gabon, the government says it is planning not to extend operating permits to 3 companies, including ADAX, which is part of China's Sinopec. Many experts believe the partnership between China and Africa will continue to grow, but now perhaps on more equal terms. For VOA Learning English, I'm Laurel Bowman. From VOA Learning English, this is the Economics Report. Ghana arrested more than 100 Chinese nationals in June. They were accused of illegally mining gold. In February, Zambia seized a Chinese-operated mine because of safety concerns. And Gabon has decided to seize property from 3 foreign oil companies, including one from China. Some observers say these and other incidents appear to be a reaction by African governments against Chinese investment on the continent. China became Africa's top trade partner in 2009, yet some Africans believe they are not getting enough for their exports. Bright Simons is with the Imani Group. He says China is no longer known only for giving loans and sending workers to build hospitals and roads. He says China is now a business partner. Ghana has taken steps against foreigners involved in shallow mining for gold. Only Ghanaians can get government approval for this kind of mining. Bright Simons says some Ghanaians rent the permits to foreigners who have the money and training to actually mine the gold. Observers say nations like Niger and Gabon want to get more for their natural resources. They want more money, more local jobs, and better living conditions. Worldwide demand for oil, coal, iron ore, and uranium has made their negotiating position stronger. Some nations are also concerned about abusive or illegal operations. In Gabon, the government says it is planning not to extend operating permits to 3 companies, including ADAX, which is part of China's Sinopec. Many experts believe the partnership between China and Africa will continue to grow, but now perhaps on more equal terms. For VOA Learning English, I'm Laurel Bowman.
This is the VOA Special English Economics Report. One of the largest air shows in the United States is also one of the largest trade shows in the aircraft industry. AirVenture took place in July at an airport in Oshkosh, Wisconsin. Ron Wagner is from the Experimental Aircraft Association, which holds the event each year. He said almost every major manufacturer and many smaller ones were represented. Visitors could find everything from old passenger planes to new unmanned aircraft, like the Predator drone. But Ron Wagner says the spirit of the event is best represented by the pilots and engineers who build their own aircraft. He said, "Much of the modern innovation has come from the home builder community in the United States. We have a lot of freedom to build, design, and fly airplanes for our own use." If you are more interested in fast cars, here is a new turn in the world of motorsports. The Speed Sisters are a racing team of 8 Palestinian women in the West Bank. The team is a dream come true for Suna Aweda, the captain. But not everyone was happy to see her in the driver's seat of the BMW race car she drives. She says her family thought motor racing was not safe and mainly for men. But she says there is no sport that is especially for men or especially for women. She says women can compete with men in all kinds of sports. In June, the Speed Sisters became the first all-female racing team to compete in the Speed Test, a popular race in the West Bank. They faced some mechanical problems, but one of them finished in the top 10. The team includes Muslims and Christians, mothers, a librarian, a business student, and a woman who competed in a beauty pageant. 2 of the drivers were born into racing families. The Speed Sisters received money from the British consulate in Jerusalem to buy a race car. They also received driving lessons and guidance from 2 British women in motorsports, Helen Elstrup and Sue Sanders. Ms. Sanders says she knew right away the Speed Sisters had the drive to succeed. She said it did not matter whether they spoke the same language or had the same culture. They had the same desire to succeed and be the best. And that's the VOA Special English Economics Report. Transcripts, MP3s, and podcasts of our reports are at voaspecialenglish.com. You can also find us on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube at VOA Learning English.
From VOA Learning English, this is the Economics Report in Special English. Greek leaders have been holding talks with financial experts from the European Union, the International Monetary Fund, and the European Central Bank. All sides are working on ways to bring Greece's huge debt under control. That debt threatens to hurt Europe and the world economy. In 2011, the Greek government decided to close 50 state agencies to save money. The country's foreign creditors have demanded these types of cost-cutting measures. But this process has been a struggle. One example is Greece's attempt to close the Organization for Public Property Management, or ODDY. ODDY ran centers around the country that sold off different kinds of goods, from furniture to cars. At a center in Athens, cars of almost every model can be found. They may have been seized from drug dealers or taken from people who could not pay their bills. And there are lots of other goods: furniture, large appliances, buses, motorcycles, even gambling machines. ODDY used to sell them all. Now, that part of the agency has been closed, and the weather is ruining many of these goods. Officially, Greece closed ODDY, but employees and government officials say they really restructured it. They say ODDY has been renamed DDDY. It is no longer an organization, but a directorate, and it is now an office of the Greek Finance Ministry. Critics of the change say the new agency is no longer effective. Jobs have been cut sharply, and many costs have moved from pay to pensions. Critics of the cuts say they may not be saving Greece money after all. But the agency says that, in time, they will cut costs. For VOA Learning English, I'm Laurel Bowman.
This is the VOA Special English Economics Report. Apple sold over 15 million iPads just in the final 3 months of 2011. Now, the popular tablet computer is in its 3rd generation. But as Apple prepared to launch a new iPad on March 7th, it faced legal challenges in China over rights to the name of the device. A court in Guangdong province heard a case brought by the Chinese company ProView Technology. ProView is based in Shenzhen in southern China and belongs to ProView International Holdings. The company says it holds the legal rights to the iPad name in China. Apple says it bought the iPad trademark in China and 9 other countries from a business owned by ProView in 2009. A lawyer for ProView said he believes Apple has not provided new evidence for the case in Guangdong. Apple was appealing a decision by a lower court which found that the company did not own the iPad name. Another lawyer for ProView said the legal issue over the trademark was clear. He said his company is fighting Apple over the idea of ownership. He also said ProView was willing to settle with Apple for the right amount of money. ProView says it holds the trademark for the name of a device called an Internet Personal Access Device, or iPad. The device looks like a desktop computer. ProView says it sold about 20,000 of them over about 10 years. It says it received the trademark or legal rights to the name in 2001. ProView is in financial trouble. It has reported losses since 2008 and dismissed thousands of workers. Apple's legal team says that ProView is nearing failure. Apple says ProView has no product, no buyers, and no suppliers. Apple argues that a ruling against Apple would harm the interests of consumers in China. Apple holds 76% of the tablet computer market in that country with its iPad. A final decision by the High Court in Guangdong is expected to take weeks. The trademark issue has not hurt Apple's stock price, at least so far. Apple has become the most valuable publicly traded stock in the world, worth about $500 billion. For VOA Special English, I'm Mario Ritter. You can read, listen, and learn English with our programs and activities at voaspecialenglish.com. You can also find English lessons at the VOA Learning English page on Facebook.
This is the VOA Special English Economics Report. Apple's new version of its desktop operating system for Mac computers is called Mac OS X Lion. Apple says this latest OS X upgrade has over 200 new features. But one big difference is how the company will sell it, only by download at its Mac App Store. The price is $29.99. Users without the current version, Snow Leopard, will have to pay an extra $30 to download the new release. Last year, Apple had more than $500 million in sales of its desktop operating system. Experts say download-only software is getting more common. Dave Wolf is a vice president at Synergy Systems in Washington. His company helps software designers to develop and market products. He says the computer that many people use most is their mobile phone. People who download apps to smartphones have come to expect quick and easy software updates. Now, Dave Wolf says phones are shaping expectations for other computers. Downloadable programs mean fewer trips to stores to buy software. But that can also mean fewer sales for stores that depend on physical products, including most video games. And not everyone has a high-speed internet connection to make downloads quick and easy. But Dave Wolf says the cost savings are a big help to small businesses trying to reach a wide market. I think it's a boon to small software companies and entrepreneurs who have incredible ideas and want to get them out to market. He says the internet radio service Pandora, for example, can offer free music because it has no costs of selling discs in stores. Pandora began selling shares of stock to the public in June. Next to go may be software stored on individual computers. Many companies are moving to cloud computing. The idea is to save money by storing software on somebody else's servers in large data centers. This way, people can easily access their music library or other applications from any device. This is not the case for users of Apple's iTunes. Now, Apple thinks it has a solution with a cloud computing service called iCloud, and Microsoft has developed Windows Azure. This platform is for businesses and software developers to use internet-based applications. For VOA Special English, I'm Alex Villarreal. For daily news and information, plus activities for English learners, go to voaspecialenglish.com.
From VOA Learning English, this is the Economics Report. The world is getting older. As more people retire each year, fewer working-age people will be there to replace them. This has effects not only in the workplace, but in the world of finance. The bond rating agency Moody's says the aging population will lead to a drop in household savings. This could mean that total investments will fall and economic growth could slow. Some reports have described Japan, Italy, and Germany as the world's super-aged nations. That is the name for countries in which at least 20% of the population is at least 65 years old. Elena Dugar is head of Moody's Sovereign Risk Division. She says changes in many populations are taking place quickly. In 5 years, 6 more countries will join the list of super-aged nations, and 34 nations will be super-aged by the year 2030. Elena Dugar says this will have a big influence on labor and savings. Kishore Kulkarni is with the Metropolitan State University of Denver. He says immigration is one way to reduce the effects of an aging population. Older adults spend money differently than younger ones, and experts say the difference affects the economies of countries. But Kishore Kulkarni believes that specialized career training and productivity gains from technology could make up for the drop in the number of workers. He also says that an aging population will be less of a problem in countries where older people are highly valued. And most experts agree that young workers will have to work longer and retire later than today's older workers. For VOA Learning English, I'm Laurel Bowman.
From VOA Learning English, this is the Economics Report in Special English. Congressional leaders and the Obama administration began budget negotiations soon after the presidential election. They are trying to avoid what is being called the fiscal cliff, which is a combination of tax increases and budget cuts that could harm the economy. However, a group of wealthy Americans has formed to try to influence those talks. More than 20 members traveled to Washington recently to call on lawmakers to raise taxes on the richest Americans. The group calls itself Patriotic Millionaires. Members have incomes of at least $1 million a year. Their message is simple: tax us more, we can take it. They are worried about the growing gap between rich and middle-class Americans. The group supports President Obama's plan to raise taxes on high-income earners as part of a budget agreement to avoid the fiscal cliff. If an agreement is not reached by the end of this year, taxes will go up for most Americans, and federal spending will go down sharply. The Patriotic Millionaires believe their taxes need to be raised. They also do not agree with the idea that increasing taxes on those who create jobs means fewer jobs will be created. TJ Zlotnitsky is the head of iControl Systems, a data management company. He is also a member of the group. He says his personal tax rate is not an issue when he decides on hiring workers. The group opposes raising taxes on the middle class, but not high earners, noting it would be bad for the economy. Patriotic Millionaires has more than 200 members across the country. They work in finance, entertainment, technology, and other areas. For VOA Learning English, I'm Alex Villarreal. I'm Alex Villarreal with the VOA Special English Economics Report. The financial crisis of 2008 brought attention to a big problem with banks. Many banks did not have enough money in reserve to protect against their losses. Now, there is a proposed solution. In September, banking supervisors from 26 nations and Hong Kong met in Basel, Switzerland. They announced proposals to make banks safer by requiring them to increase their reserves. The Basel Committee on Banking Supervision has been working on a set of recommendations known as Basel III. These are based on agreements reached in July by officials from a group of leading industrial nations. The goal is to stop the cycle of easing rules on banks in good times and tightening them only after a crisis. Under the new rules, banks would have to hold reserves equal to 7% of their risk-weighted assets. Mainly, this means loans. Currently, banks are required to hold 2% in reserve. The bigger reserves could be in the form of cash or common stock, also known as common equity. Banks would also have to hold extra reserves as their national economies improve. The new requirements would go into effect starting in January of 2013. Banks would have 5 years to fully meet them. International banking lawyer Ernie Patricus, a former vice president of the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, explains why. He says, "We cannot be telling banks on the one hand, raise capital right away, and on the other hand, lend more." One way for banks to meet the proposed new rules would be to sell more of their stock. That is what Germany's Deutsche Bank did in September. It announced a sale offer valued at over $11 billion. Ernie Patricus thinks chief executive officers of banks have three choices. He says one is to go out and raise more common equity. Another one is to not pay dividends. And that is not something most CEOs want to do because their shareholders aren't going to be particularly happy. And the third choice is sell assets, downsize the bank. Nations on the Basel Committee will now seek to pass the new rules into law so their banking supervisors can enforce them. Banks that fall below the reserve limits could have to stop paying dividends to shareholders or bonuses to top employees. Ending dividends would anger shareholders, and limiting pay could send bankers fleeing to hedge funds, where there are fewer rules. For VOA Special English, I'm Alex Villarreal. This is the VOA Special English Economics Report. Central bankers have to choose their words carefully, so they often say little in public, or little that makes sense. But the United States Central Bank says it is trying to be more clear and timely in communicating its policies. The latest example, a press conference by Chairman Ben Bernanke. The April 27th event was the first of its kind in the 98-year history of the Federal Reserve. In his opening comments, Mr. Bernanke explained a decision by the Federal Open Market Committee to leave its main short-term interest rate near zero. The committee had just completed a 2-day meeting. Mr. Bernanke said, "The committee continues to anticipate that the economic conditions, including low rates of resource utilization, subdued inflation trends, and stable inflation expectations, are likely to warrant exceptionally low levels for the federal funds rate for an extended period." In other words, the economy is not growing fast enough to worry about inflation. A reporter asked what an extended period means to the Fed. Mr. Bernanke said it suggests a couple of meetings probably, but it all depends on the economy. He said it is very hard to blame the American public for being impatient with the speed of the recovery. But he pointed out that unemployment is still high, oil and gasoline prices are high, and the housing market remains very weak. The committee said it will complete purchases of $600 billion in Treasury securities in June. The Fed launched the bond buying program late last year in an effort to keep interest rates low and strengthen the economy. Some economists say this second round of what is known as quantitative easing, or QE2, has not been effective. Mr. Bernanke disagreed and pointed to examples like gains in stock prices. The Fed has two main goals for its monetary policy: the highest possible employment rates and stable prices. The bank faced criticism for intervening either too little to some critics or too much to others in the financial crisis. The press conference produced no surprises, yet as recently as the middle of the 1990s, The Fed did not even release its decisions or its interest rate targets to the public. The Fed announced in March that Mr. Bernanke will hold 4 press briefings a year. The next of 3 planned for this year will follow a decision on interest rates in June. For VOA Special English, I'm Alex Villarreal.